So, Chris, this is a very interesting episode because I met you a few years ago on a random experience where I ended up somehow on the BBC through a mate of mine. But for people who don't know who Chris Bavin is, that maybe don't have the BBC in their households, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, so it's not the most exciting story, I'm afraid, but yeah, my name's Chris Bavin. I have worked in the fresh produce industry my whole life. Well, first of all, I started out in the horticultural industry. So I started importing flowers from around the world and selling to the wholesale markets. I wasn't particularly academic at school. I didn't have a really sort of clear, well, I don't know if many people do, but I certainly didn't have a very clear idea of what I wanted to do or you know, the career that I would sort of follow. So I left school at 16 and I just found a job in the back of a local newspaper, which is how we used to find jobs pre-internet. This was in 1996 and I applied for a job for a junior flower trader. Turned up, knew nothing about flowers, knew nothing about the world of importing or perishable goods or the wholesale markets or anything like that. And I was offered the job, and then my boss, Mike Dodds, who, you know, it was a great guy, and you know, I'm always grateful for him taking that chance on me, said, look, the wholesale market is a very unusual place. It's a very antiquated place. It's a very unique place. To sell into the wholesale market, you've got to really have an understanding of it. So they sent me into Western International wholesale market to work, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning, cutting standing flowers, putting them in buckets, doing, you know, all these sorts of bits and pieces. And from the very first moment I walked into a wholesale market, I just fell in love with it. You know, they're noisy, they're vibrant, they're hustle, they're bustle, they're incredible places. You know, for someone that's never been to a wholesale market, they operate at night. So these places are, you know, enormous sort of warehouses or hangars, if you like, with lots of businesses within it. They supply, so in the flowers, they would supply florists and street traders and places like that. In the fruit and veg wholesale markets, they will supply greengrocers, street traders, restaurants, all of those sorts of places, catering companies. They operate at night. They're just an electric, vibrant, amazing place, you know, with some real characters, lots of banter, lots of laughter, lots of joking, you know, and this environment, although completely alien to me, was just, you know, I sort of, and it sounds a bit of a cliche and a bit sort of, I don't know, a bit romantic, but I instantly felt at home and just thought, wow. And for the first time in my life, I sort of thought, wow, this is something I could do. And it's a real, you know, there's lots of, you know, not rags to riches, but lots of people that have come from sort of, you know, fairly humble backgrounds have gone on to become very successful. You know, it's not an industry of you know, what qualifications have you got or what university have you got or you know, who your parents are or whatever. You know, it really is if you're prepared to apply yourself, if you're prepared to work hard enough, if you've got a bit of something about you, you can succeed in this environment. And I just loved it, absolutely loved it. And then so I worked in this industry and did well for maybe 3, 4, 5 years. And someone said to me, look, the flower industry is great, but if you want to continue growing at the rate you are, you might want to look at taking a side step into the world of fruit and veg, because, you know, if the flower industry is worth a couple of £1 billion a year in the UK, the fruit and veg industry, you can times that by 100. You know, it's astronomical. It's, you know, it's almost exhaustive. It's unlimited. You know, there's no limits to it. So then I did that, but there's lots of synergies. You know, selling fresh cut flowers are very similar to selling fruit and veg, because, you know, it's perishable, it's chilled, it's sold through the same business model, the same markets, the same sort of people. So there's lots of synergies there. So I took a side step into fruit and veg, and again, just, you know, loved it, did quite well, and still remain in that industry to this day. So that's been about 20 something odd years. Maybe even, you know, God, blimey, maybe 25 years now. And I still love it. I still have lots of friends in the business. I still work occasionally in the industry. And whilst I was on that journey of working in the fruit and veg market, all I was hearing from my customer base was the greengrocers were dying out. So that's my customer's customer, if you like. And that sort of didn't make sense to me, because I thought, a good greengrocer should be doing well. I sort of felt that, we wouldn't go to get our car fixed from anywhere other than the qualified mechanic in a garage. Why would you buy your fruit and veg from anyone that isn't a specialist fruit and veg person? So then in 2009, I just thought, I'm going to open a greengrocers just to see why this business is being squeezed as much as it is. And in 2009, we opened the Naked Grocer, which was one of the first zero plastic, zero waste, environmentally conscious, environmentally friendly shops. They're quite common now. You have these real refill shops and zero plastic shops, but they weren't as common then, and there wasn't many, if any, really out there. So we opened that, and the Naked Grocer was that. It was, as nature intended, without any of that additional packaging and plastic. So that's where the term the Naked Grocer came from.
And that's the business you opened with your other half?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, with my wife. Yep. And it was brilliant. We had it for 8-9 years, and I loved every minute of it. It was fabulous. It was a real steep learning curve. I learned more as a greengrocer. I learned more about fruit and veg than I had, for many, many more years as an importer. Having the customers in front of you and the product in your hand was a real eye-opener and fascinating. And we won a couple of awards. So we won Best Greengrocer of the, an independent retailer of the UK. And from that, we were approached by a TV company, by a production company. I got a phone call one day out of the blue, and I'd never even considered being on telly, not for a split second, not once, not ever. That was something that just wasn't, it just didn't feel that would ever be possible, or something that could ever happen. So I think if you asked a child now, or a younger person now, maybe they want to be a vlogger or a blogger or a YouTuber, or, an influencer, or work on telly. But, for me, being born in the 80s, that was something that never seemed possible or plausible. So it never crossed my mind. And one day my phone rings, and this lady introduces herself as working for RDF Television, and have I ever thought about being on telly? And I can honestly say, hand on heart, I said no. And they said, well, look, we think you're great. Would you like to try? And I said, well, listen, not really. I mean, I was working 100 hours a week. I had 2 jobs. I was working as an importer and and I had the retail business. And I thought, maybe I'd get like 50 quid and then, and it would be, something I'd do for a couple of weeks, and then that would be it. I never once dreamt it would lead to a career. But luckily they persevered and said, no, look, we want to make this show. We want you in it. Like, let's do it. And we went to the market. We went to New Covent Garden Market. We did like a sizzler tape or a taster tape, which is just a bit of just an example of what you might do, basically. And then, they sent that to the BBC, and they liked it and said, yeah, like, make it. And that was Eat Well for Less. And that was 9 odd years ago. And we've just finished series 8 or 9. And it does really well. And that sort of put me in that sphere of food on telly. And then from that, you become a bit more aware of nutrition, certainly more aware of cooking and the challenges that families are facing and stuff. And now I've sort of moved myself into a space where I do some TV programs about food consumer, cooking shows, and this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, and it's something that you still sort of pinch yourself and think, this is a bit bonkers, really. Like, how has this happened?
Yeah.
But brilliant, and I'm grateful. We'll always be grateful for it.
Going back to the transition from the importing business into the retail market, the greengrocers, you mentioned about that being such a lucrative industry to be in. Yet going into the high street business is, especially going into business with your wife, which any person would try and advise you to go out going into business with your other half, is a massive, massive gamble and a massive risk. What is it that made you take such a gamble into going into something potentially so much smaller when you had something that was very, you moved into fruit and veg because you wanted to grow, and then you took this riskier side step?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was foolhardy. I mean, my parents, took a mortgage out on their house to lend me the money to start up. I mean, my ambition that I never realized, unfortunately, was to open a chain. That was always my goal, to start with one, roll it out to become a prominent force on the high street, to sort of turn back the clock, to put greengrocers back on the map, to change people's shopping habits, to try and negate the environmental impact our food is having. And I had big plans and big ambitions, and like many things, life gets in the way. You become so bogged down with the day to day. Like I say, I was running a decent sized retail business, but only one. It had other facets to the business. We had a veg box business, we had a small catering business, and a small flower shop, but ultimately it was in essence just one retail business. And I was working 100 hours a week regularly, 7 days a week, 6.5 days a week, didn't have a holiday for a few years, was still involved in the importing of fruit and veg, and still doing that as well. And then the emerging TV career, and I was being pulled in 3 different directions, and it was pretty unsustainable. It wasn't great for me. My sort of health not significantly deteriorated, but I put on weight, and I wasn't looking after myself, and wasn't sleeping a lot, and wasn't doing anything for me, and so. And then I had we had our first child, and then you've got to you get to a point where you just think, right, okay, what am I doing here? I'm doing 3 or 4 things badly. I'm not being a great husband. I'm not being a great father. I'm not being the best importer. I'm not being the best retailer, and I'm probably not being the best TV presenter, because I'm trying to do too much. And then as is the way, you've got that decision. Do I go and employ someone really good who's going to cost me a lot of money to run this business in my absence? Although you've got to be aware that no one will run your business, no one will care as much as you, because why would they? Why should they? So yeah, in the end, we had to take the very difficult decision to shut the retail side. We kept the veg box business going for a few years after that, but then even that, we sort of, if you've got to live these businesses, you've got to be there almost every minute of every day, and if you're not there, it doesn't run as well, and the service, the quality, all these things that you really pride yourself on can sometimes take a bit of a hit. So we took the decision to close the business, but we retained all the IP and the name and all of that, and there is the very distinct possibility that one day we will revisit it. I've got 3 young children, and when they get to a stage where they don't need me around as much, and I'm not as busy with the kids and stuff, then it's something that I would definitely revisit. But yeah, you're right, it was a risk. And there were times where it was going very, very badly. And there were times when it was going very, very well. But yeah, the margins are very small. The effort and input is very high. And the high street, is an expensive place to operate, and we learned lots of very, very tough lessons. I mean, if you sign a particularly long lease, you pay stamp duty on that, which was something I didn't know. The way the rates are formulated, if you have a really wide, shallow shop, you pay extraordinarily higher business rates than if you have a slim, deeper shop. All these things were, the cost of setting up a business, the infrastructure, all of that, was extraordinary. And but I maintain a good business can still make money. A good business can still offer, something special, and have that point of difference and have that point of relevance. But it's a challenge, and I would implore anyone going into it, go into it with your eyes wide open, and make sure you protect yourself, and make sure you're, you know, not committing yourself for too long a period. Make sure you have lots of break clauses available to you, and yeah, go, you know, because we all have this inbuilt thing where if we want to do something, we make it work for us. You know, if you really want something, you'll turn a blind eye to lots of red flags, and you'll convince yourself that it'll all be okay, and that doesn't really matter. But I think, you know, you have to make sure, take a step back, you know, check it with some other people, maybe get an advisor or a mentor, or you know, an impartial person to just go through everything with you, and just make sure your heart isn't leading your head, which it certainly can in those circumstances. We had a lot of really expensive lessons. I had one lesson where we didn't change the lease because I had an agreement in writing and in person, and was done with a handshake, and then that became apparent that wasn't legally binding, even though it was in writing. The lease hadn't been changed, and you know, that wouldn't stand up in a court of law. So be very aware in the UK and probably lots of other countries as well. You know, that lease is king. That is so important. And if that isn't changed, it doesn't matter what else. You know, it doesn't matter if you've got it in writing, in blood, you know, videoed, whatever, doesn't matter. If the lease hasn't been changed, then that doesn't stand up. So yeah, lots of lessons, but I, you know, looking back, don't regret a minute of it. Loved it. And like I say, we'll hopefully one day be back.
I think it's an important lesson anyone can take from this about being pulled in different directions. I know I'm certainly guilty of that. I'm very much it was Richard Branson's quote of, when you get an opportunity, say yes, and you know, work out how to do it later. And while I think that some of those opportunities have worked really well for me, it's allowed me to get to Hong Kong, it allowed me to move to London, it gave me a lot of opportunities. But I also think sometimes I'm guilty of taking on more than I can handle. And like yourself, being in this position where you're pulled in several different directions. Did you see a big upshift in the quality of TV when you made that choice away from the retail business into the television stuff a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did. Yeah, because I was going into my jobs prepped. I was going into my jobs reasonably rested. I was going into my jobs fresher. I didn't have the phone continually going. And listen, I've never solely done the telly completely by itself, but even taking some of those layers away, and now the projects that I do are projects that I can work alongside the TV. You know, I do some consultancy work, I do some project management, I do some various different bits and pieces still in the industry. But I always now make sure that they can run alongside each other in a complementary way, as opposed to a conflicted sort of way. So, you know, if I'm in Scunthorpe, you know, talking to someone or interviewing someone or doing something, my phone's going and one of the vans has been in an accident and someone hasn't turned up for work and this hasn't happened and this is a problem and that's happening and blah, 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 you know, like your head's not where it should be. So yeah, I did notice an improvement. I mean, whether from a viewer's perspective they would notice or not, I don't know. I would probably imagine not, but certainly from my perspective, I was more, you know, being present is a terminology that's used a lot now, you know, and we use it for lots of different things, you know, be present, be in the moment, all of that. And I was more present, you know, after not being, you know, after, you know, streamlining my responsibilities and taking some of those away, I was more present in the moment. So in that sense, there was an improvement for sure.
So moving into the television stuff a little bit, obviously this, you said you'd never considered being on television. This wasn't in your thought process at all. And this is obviously a very intimidating thing for a lot of people. We see a lot of people struggle with making that transition. Like, did you feel an element of like imposter syndrome or stage fright when you got in front of the camera? Or did it come naturally because you had that communication skills in the retail stuff?
I think a bit of both, really. I think there was an element of transferable skill set that I came with. You know, I am a good communicator. I don't think that's conceited or arrogant to say I think I am a good communicator, because most of us are actually. I'm not unique in that sense. If you take anybody from my industry, they are good communicators.
I was about to say, do you think your industry helped you in the television front? Because you said at the start, this is very much there's a lot of banter, there's a lot of communication, everything's going on. You sort of have to be heard in those situations.
You have to be heard, and you have to listen. And I think if listening is the most important thing. I think that's critical. That's crucial. Listening comes in front of talking. Obviously, I'm aware there's a slight irony to that because I'm doing a lot of talking now, but listening is the key. I think, everybody in the fresh produce industry, everybody in the wholesale market, everybody in that world, not everybody, but the majority are fabulous communicators, very good people, very personable, very likable, very affable, very agreeable. It's not to say that business is without conflict in times. Of course it is, and we have to resolve those conflicts. But we work, if I'm selling fruit or vegetables to someone, I'm talking to this person every day, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times a day, because it's not like selling someone a car. You sell them a car, you don't see them for 4, 5, 10, 15 years. You may never see them again. If I'm selling them a truck or a pallet of oranges, I'm going to speak to them again tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And sometimes, there's challenges. Sometimes things aren't as good as you would have liked them to be, or the market isn't as strong, or the price doesn't seem right, or whatever. There's a million variables within every transaction, and you have to navigate those. And everybody is a good communicator and a big personality. So it's an industry of big personalities. So there was lots of transferable skills from the industry that I came from into the new one, into media. In terms of imposter syndrome, in terms of stage fright, in terms of being overwhelmed or feeling anxious about it, 100%, yes. I think that is true. It was true for me. I think it's true of everybody. I think unless there is some real big disconnect, you must feel that. I think or maybe that's not fair to say, but I know a lot of people in the industry, and I would say it's true of the majority. It may not be true of all, but it is true of the majority. I think we all have a sense of, but why me? What I'm not. I mean, the trap to fall in a lot is, especially if I'm talking about, if you look at the areas that I work in nutrition loosely. I work in food in terms of cooking and advising and shopping and in terms of consumer issues. If you look at any one of these things in isolation or even as a collective, there are people out there that are far more experienced, far more knowledgeable than I. That's the fact of the matter. So there is always that, I don't know enough. People know more than me. People are better than me. People white. But what you do is it's everything together, because if you know everything, maybe you can't relate to the person that doesn't know everything. So what I've sort of found myself in a position where they call it in television, they call it an informed curiosity. So you know enough to ask the right questions of an expert. You don't know too much that you can't ask these questions. You know enough that you can ask informed questions with a baseline of knowledge. But then if you're coming away from an expert and you're talking to somebody in the street, you can relate to them because you don't have all the answers. You might have a level of information. You may have a reasonable baseline of knowledge, but you don't know everything. And so you can relate to the layman and you can relate to the expert, and you find yourself in the middle there, where actually you become the bridge, you become the conduit, you become the sort of middle person between those two places, which when you sort of realize that, it all sort of makes sense, and then you sort of become more at peace with it. And you sort of then understand that I don't need to know everything. I shouldn't necessarily even know. Because if you ever watch two experts talking, it's different because they can't ask. It becomes very different or very difficult then to translate that into very simplistic, understandable terms, because nobody really wants to lower their level of knowledge. No one can be seen, neither could be seen to be asking the other one a question. So then it's basically two people talking at each other, maybe trying to, and then they delve into levels of complexity that become, they alienate the audience. So actually you need someone like me or someone else that has a good baseline of knowledge, an interest in that area, a desire to find out more, and then you can ask the questions. And I've always, I'm a big believer in when I've employed people over the years and worked with people and mentored people and all. There is no such thing as a stupid question. There is not, and I think that's really important. Maybe if you've asked the same question 5, 6, 10, 15 times, then there becomes a point where you should know. But in that first instance, there is no such thing as a stupid question.
I suppose with the people who are watching your show, your job is to be the voice of them in these shows. And that stupid question, if you're thinking it, I guarantee you so many people in the nation are thinking it, and your job is then to ask it. Like you're very different to the experts. You're there to be the voice for us, and also, as you said, the bridge, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. And that you're absolutely right. And that is, and full well when you're talking to an expert, or you're in a factory, or you're somewhere, you know full well what everybody's sat at home, because you go, well, how, or why, or what about that, or what does that do, or what's this, and why do I need that? And it is the questions that everybody is asking at home. So that is my job. So in that sense, that alleviates some of that anxiety and that nervousness that you don't need to know everything. But there's also, and nerves are interesting as well. I still get nervous. I think, and now as a dad to 3 children, they're going through their own things. With the school play, or the trial for this or that. And nerves are an interesting thing actually, because I think they're really important. I think nerves they do a few things. One, they show you something's important. Yeah. That it matters, that it means something. If you're not nervous about something, there's almost an irony there that if I don't get nervous, I get nervous that I'm not nervous, because actually, why am I not nervous about this? Like, does this not matter? Is this not the right thing? Do I not care about this? Because if I've got nerves, that they're all the indicators that I'm on the right path, that I'm doing something, that I'm moving forward, that I'm challenging myself, that I'm taking myself out of my comfort zone, that I'm progressing, that I'm, so I sort of, there is a comfort to the nerves in a way, because it shows that I'm on the right track. And I think as long as you don't let them overpower you, you don't let them control you, then I think they can be an ally. They can be they can be a benefit. They can be a strength in a way. And your body's interesting as well, because it can't really tell the difference between nervousness and excitement, or fear and anxiety and anticipation. And so actually they're very closely linked. And there's lots of things you can do about sort of trying to train yourself to say, no, look, I am nervous, but actually I'm also excited. A lot of what I'm feeling at the moment is excitement. I'm excited because I've got the opportunity to speak to 1,000 people in this room. I'm excited about that. Yeah, of course there's nerves, but there's a level of excitement as well. And I think that, and as soon as you get up there, and as soon as you get into whatever it is, you've just got to start. You just start talking or start doing whatever it is you're doing it. But I think nerves are prominent and not without their role. I think they've got there's a benefit to them as well.
I couldn't agree more with that. I've always said, like, when people ask about imposter syndrome, I've got asked that. I've spent a lot of time mentoring trainers and done a bit of public speaking, not to the degree that you have, and I get asked about that imposter syndrome a lot. And I always think, like, if it wasn't for my imposter syndrome, I wouldn't keep progressing. My curiosity, like you said, in my craft is based on this level of imposter syndrome. If I thought I'd reached a pinnacle, I'd sit back and be comfortable. And it's that, okay, where is the gaps in my knowledge I can go and find out, plug, or who can I speak to, and what conversations can I have? And that's part of the reason why I love doing this medium of podcasting, because you meet people from very different, not only expertise, but just different backgrounds and different takes on the same thing. I've had about 5 or 6 different takes on imposter syndrome, and all the people I've known that have a, whatever you call success, but a relative realm of success, come at it the same way, in that it's only a negative if you let it paralyze you, which is easily done, but it's just about trying to find and take those actions. I mean, you said you've employed people. I don't know if this is within the retail business or whether it's in the TV world, but you must have worked with a lot of people that are brand new to this. I mean, you worked with me being brand new to it when I did that show. Have you had a situation where someone was paralyzed by it, and have you helped them through it? And if so, what advice would you give to somebody in that situation?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've never employed anyone in the media world, because I'm just a freelance, a self-employed freelance person. I get employed to do so. Yeah. But yeah, in all my other walks of life, I have. But in terms of the media, yeah, 100%. I mean, I've filmed with everybody from every single different part of the world, and in industry and levels of success and all of that. And I could go and be filming with the chairman of a £1 billion business, but in that moment they could be nervous. They could be nervous for a whole host of reasons, like what my shareholders going to make of this, or my customer. I've got very big clients that will be watching this. I must, they've got some pressures from all different angles and stuff. So there is there could be a nervousness in anyone for different reasons. Everybody's level of expectation and potential consequences from something are personal to them. But yeah, I have had people that are very, very nervous, and some have sort of struggled to get relaxed in that environment. But so, as I said earlier, one of my main jobs as a TV presenter is to listen, which is really important. Actually, probably my most important role on that day is to make sure that whoever I'm talking to is at ease and they feel comfortable and happy. So I find that as my primary objective. And actually, I don't know what it is. I don't have a real hard and fast rule or template or do's and don'ts, or I don't have the answer really. But most people, I managed to make most people feel relaxed and calm, and that might be through a bit of self-deprecation. That might be just making the whole thing feel a bit irrelevant and ludicrous. Maybe you can find a way of lightening that situation. What I always say to people as well is, and it's not just I don't just say this. This is what lots of people say in that situation. But it's not live. We can start and stop as much as you like. Don't, if you feel at any stage you don't know what to say or you don't want to answer, just look at well, let me tell you, I'll tell you an anecdote actually that Gregg Wallace said to me. So we were going on BBC Breakfast to promote Eat Well for Less. So the new series is coming out, and this is the series 1. This is right in the beginning. And Greg said, "How you feeling?" I said, "I'm a bit nervous about this, to be honest." He said, "Right, okay, well, look, what are you nervous about?" I said, "Well, I don't know really. I suppose what could go wrong?" They asked me a question, I don't have the answer. And he said, "Fine, well, that's no problem." He said, "Look, if they ask you something that you don't know the answer to, or you just, your mind goes blank or whatever, just look at me and I'll start talking." And in that, that made me feel a lot better. And subsequently, I've been in a position where I've managed to do the same for younger, newer, less experienced presenters in the same situation. And also, you've got to be aware that whoever's interviewing you, the pressure, the onus is on them for the conversation to flow. Like if they ask you a question and you just clam up and they just look at you and you just look at them, the fault lies with the interviewer, not the interviewee. it's their job to change the question, to offer up an answer, to take it in a new direction, to ask something else, to get you involved, to get you relaxed, to make you feel calm. Like, so, and that's true of when I'm interviewing or talking to someone on telly. You know, the onus is on me.
Pressure's on me now, right?
Yeah,
Pressure's on me now.
It is. Well, it is. You know, that is the hierarchy of responsibility. You know, but in that situation, if I asked, or now if you ask me something that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm clearly not comfortable, I clearly don't know, or, you know, I'd rather not talk about it or whatever, you know, it's your job to move that, to navigate it. Now, sometimes the challenge comes when you are trying to, and this doesn't really apply to me a lot because it's not really the area I work, but if you were on Newsnight, for example, or on the news, and you are, you know, conducting a robust interview, and you are and the interviewee is trying not to answer, and then you've got to really double down and drill in and, you know, hold their feet to the fire, if you like, you know, or hold, you know, keep pushing that line of inquiry. Then it's a completely different ballpark. But luckily, I don't really get involved in that too much because it's not the space I work. But I've found over the years, most people with a bit of love and a bit of care and a bit of consideration will relax into it. And you know, we always do the top at the, you know, a lot of the times it's nice to do the beginning at the end again, you know, just as they've got into their flow and they're relaxed, and, you know, invariably 10-15 minutes in is fine, they're relaxed and stuff. But yeah, it's just about, you know, you just say, look, it's only telly, don't worry about it. If I can do it, you can do it. Or, you know, John over there on the camera, like, he can't read or write, like, don't worry, like, or whatever, you know, you just make
I remember you saying that to me when we were in my flat in Greenwich.
Well, that's it. Like, you tease, you would make fun of yourself, and you would tease each other around, and that suddenly it just becomes less of a sort of intimidating environment, you know. But listen, it's still a big thing, like someone holding a TV camera up and or a microphone or whatever and asking you questions will always be a bit daunting and a little bit, you know, nerve-wracking, but they soon dissipate, in my experience.
You're certainly right how it's a different realm. Like doing what you do, it's relatively light-hearted TV, yes. Right? Whereas opposed to like a Newsnight show or something like that, and those things I can imagine become really difficult interviews, because by the nature of the interviewing and the questions and trying to get answers, you'll find the person will actually tighten up even more. I watched recently, I don't know if you saw it, the Diary of a CEO podcast with Matt Hancock, and I've never seen him feel so relaxed. And it's amazing that it took him being on the back benches to be able to answer some questions and relax. And it shows what those interview environments are like. And yes. I say different world, but I can certainly vouch for working with you, you know, albeit only temporarily, how easy it was to get at ease. And I found the whole procedure of working on that show absolutely fascinating. I thought it was really, really, really interesting. But sort of like, you mentioned the advice you give to other people, but you also mentioned you work with so many people, from, like, you mentioned Gregg Wallace, you mentioned, you know, you got Gloria Huniford you've worked with. Did I see you work with Dara Breen at one point as well?
Yeah, Mary Berry, Claudia Winkleman, Angela Hartnett, some real big names, you know, and you learn from them. I mean, I've not. Gregg was the one that, because he was the first person I worked with, he was quite instrumental in offering advice, and I would go to him for advice, and probably would still, actually, if I needed, he would be someone that I would call upon. In terms of the others, you know, Gloria, I learned a lot from, because Gloria comes from a journalistic background, and it was interesting when we worked on Food, Truth or Scare together, that you would get your scripts and you would go through them, and me being sort of fairly inexperienced, well, certainly massively inexperienced by comparison, I would just read my bits, you know, that they're the bits that I have to learn. They're the bits that I'm going to be saying. They were the bits that I was focusing on, actually. And that's not necessarily wrong. But then Gloria said something to me, and I realized that she's reading the whole thing. She's reading my bits. She's reading her bits. She's checking everything. She's aware of absolutely everything. And that also comes into that listening thing that I said, that I was almost in that sort of tunnel of just do my bit. Like Gloria knows her bit. That's fine. Like, I don't need to, like, that's not, but she took a more holistic approach to it and understood, because actually I did need to know her stuff, because that was going to lead into mine, or would have been led from me into that. So for me not to have an understanding of that was actually a bit naive. But you know, you've only got a finite period of time, and you've got a lot of stuff to learn. And my instinct was, right, get my bits right. You know, Gloria will look after her bits. I'll get my bits right. But actually, you know, she taught me that no, you need to know everything. You know, you need to know it all, because it's all relevant and it's all woven in. So yeah, so I learned that from her and many other things as well. And working with Claudia Winkleman, who for me is the best broadcaster on the face of the earth. She's amazing.
Why do you say that?
Just the way she does it. She's fabulously bright, like fabulously bright, but she can be quite deferential. She can be quite self-deprecating. She's very funny. She's very relaxed. And it's that balance of like super on something, but in a really casual, laid back way. Like she has that balance so fabulous. She does it so well. Better, in my opinion, better than anyone else, bar none. You know, she's really, really good, and it was great. You know, I mean, but it's very difficult to watch her and think you can learn. But there's such a natural, it's just such a natural talent that actually it's not like you go, oh, if I did X, Y, and Z, I would be better like she is. It's very hard to nail down what it is. Very ethereal. Like it's in the, you know, it's not something really tangible. Like, so what I learned from Gloria was something very tangible and something that I could easily apply to the next day. You know, no problem. Like I've learned something, now I can apply it. When you work with Claudia, you know it's amazing. You know she's brilliant, but you can't quite think, what could I, like, how do I take that? How do I apply that to what, because it's a very natural talent that she's got. So, but again, amazing. And it, you know, and everybody, Mary, Mary Berry is just, you know, not only a national treasure. And you can also learn things about being a good person as well from people. You know, you might not necessarily take tips on being a better broadcaster, which you can as well, but you can also take tips on how to just be in that world and in that space, because Mary and Gloria and you know, they're so humble and they make so much time for everybody, and they're so just generous with their time and stuff. And I've always thought that would come fairly naturally to me anyway, because first of all, I'm not a big mega star anyway, but I'm also, you know, really a people person and have come from fairly humble beginnings as well. So I feel that would always be a natural thing for me. But great to see that, you know, actually, you know, that even that if you do manage to climb, you know, up the ladder, that how important it is to maintain those values that I've seen someone like Mary do. You know, Mary will always give you time, will always remember everybody's name, will always, you know, make herself available and be generous with her time, as actually, to be fair, if not all of everybody I've worked with. So yeah, it's interesting. You take bits and pieces, and there's times where you, again, you know, I'll be sat in a green room with Angela Hartnett and Claudia Winkleman, or Tom Kerridge, or you know, Mary, or you know, Monty Don, or and you just think like, wow, this is bonkers. You know, how am I sat here? And there is that bit of imposter syndrome that kicks in there as well. But but actually you're all people, aren't you? At the end of the day, you break it down, we're all pretty much the same. You might have different interests and come from different places, but yeah, and luckily, touch wood, in my experience, everybody I've met has been really nice and really lovely. So yeah.
I think it's amazing how those things, they do come back though, right? I think it's a big world, but it's also a very small world. And it's amazing that you'll hear stories very quickly that people will give back, and like little things. Like I'm very honoured that you said yes to this podcast. Right? I've met you once in person prior to this, and little things like that will be remembered, and they'll be remembered. If you do this on my show, you'll do this for other people in other facets of life, in the same way that other people will help you. Like going back to the Claudia thing, I think it's interesting about working with people that have a natural talent. You mentioned that there's this untangible naturalness to her, and I totally agree watching it. Does that sometimes make your job harder? Like I know I did a podcast with a guy called Jordan Shallow, who is a chiropractor and strength coach, really at the top of his game, and he's so into it to the point where he'll go off on a tangent in a story and I'll just get lost in it. And that point of this is where listening, as much as the most important factor when doing an interview, sometimes it can be a detriment where I get lost in it so much I get caught where am I going next? Do you find it sometimes it's hard to sort of remember where you are and filter back when you get someone that's so unbelievably good?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. But then, so it depends on what medium you're doing. So on something like this, it's absolutely fine. Get lost in it. Dive in and completely immerse yourself. And if someone stops talking and you have to just take a minute to just process and calibrate, and sort of, just digest, that's fine. But if you were on a live TV show, they're not listening, and I remember the first time I sat on a live TV show was quite unnerving. They'll ask you a question on a 2-shot, and then as you start answering the question, the cameras will go to a single, to just filming you. And at that point, the interviewers are right. They're looking at their next thing, because they won't have that luxury of, right, wow, okay, oh wow, and then checking what to. So they're on the next thing. But with most mediums, I don't think that's a negative. I think if you just go, wow, okay, woof, I wasn't expecting that, or that's it. That I don't know where to start with that. Wow, you've covered so much there, and that's fine, and that's normal, and that's natural, and that's absolutely fine. So, I absolutely get what you're saying. That sometimes there is it's a safety net, and I used to do it in the beginning, and the safety net was, what am I going to say next? I want to be ready, but actually, you don't need that safety net. Because you could have said something to me and I go, right, okay, he's just said that. Now I'm good. That would, for me, that leads on to that, or I'll ask that. And while I'm having this inner dialogue, you could have said the most groundbreaking, unbelievable, thing, and I'm not quite there with it. And then I just go, yeah, so you mentioned this, and arguably I've missed a more important, poignant point that you've made.
Yeah.
So, and Gregg also gave me some advice on this. He said, trust yourself. You will have a question at the end. And even if you don't, you can just take a minute, because we're not doing live television primarily. So that's absolutely fine for you to just go, whoa, and then formulate your thoughts and process your thoughts. But I did in the beginning, for sure I did. I'm there, right, what am I, you're almost anticipating, you're preempting, you're forward planning, and none of those things are bad. None of those things are wrong. But if you can just let go of that and trust yourself, that at the end of it, if something interesting has been said, or something noteworthy has been said, or something has, of interest has been said, you'll have the questions, you'll have that follow-up question, because you're working in your area, you have that informed curiosity. You might not, and that might be your follow-up question, could well be, I don't understand that, or can you explain that to me in a different way, or could you summarize that for me? Or sometimes what the question isn't, as an interviewer or as the presenter, as you are in this instance, your question, and don't take this the wrong way, but your questions aren't the most important thing. As my questions aren't the most important thing when I'm interviewing someone. The most important thing is the answer. And sometimes your question could be, could you elaborate on that? Could you tell me a bit more about that? Or how did you feel when that was happening? Or what did that mean to you? Or whatever. Like, so sometimes you're not even asking a question, you're just nudging.
Yeah.
Or you're beckoning on a bit more. If you just, and sometimes your question is nothing. Sometimes your question is silence. And they, like if you mentioned Joe Rogan at the top of this, I don't know whether it was before we started recording or not, but you mentioned Joe Rogan. I'm not a massive listener of Joe Rogan shows. I depending on who his guest is, would determine whether I listen to his show or not. He interviewed Elon Musk, and there was a big furore about it actually afterwards, and the share price tanked and all of this because I think they smoked on it or whatever. But if you've ever listened to an Elon Musk interview, he's very considered. He's very slow in delivery. He's obviously a fabulously, off the chart, brilliantly bright and talented. But when he talks, he's slow and methodical and deliberate. And I thought, when I heard Joe Rogan interview him, I thought, wow, you've done such an amazing job, because and podcast is a brilliant medium for this. And whether it was on a different medium, that may not have been able to happen. But he left Elon to do his thing. And that probably went against everything. As an interviewer, as a podcaster, as a broadcaster, as a presenter, you want to, right, let's go. Right, okay, so what, why, how, when, come, like, you're chivying things along. He went the other way, and he was just, sometimes he was just like, yeah, wow, or right, and just letting go. And he just, so sometimes as an interviewer, doing nothing is the right thing, saying nothing is the right thing, so it's horses for courses, but you'll feel it, you learn it, you get an instinct, because some people, if you stop talking, they clam up, they stop, they will wait for you to ask a question, and others will go of their own accord. So it's just finding that balance and finding what works for different people and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't get too bogged up in worrying about your next thing or whatever, but it's common. That's not uncommon, and I will reiterate, that's not wrong either. It's just,
I remember early stages of doing this show. I'm not a huge amount of episodes in, but 60, 70 odd episodes in. And I remember the first time was that I had this very long list of very specific questions next to me, and I was like, almost get caught up in thinking what my next one is. And it was only when I kind of went back to bullet points of like, here's talking points, I'll touch them in any order. And there's so many episodes now where I've barely touched them. I've gone off in one way, I had an idea for the show, and I've had to change the title because we've gone off in a different way. And there's some of the best episodes I've had. And like you say about Rogan, I love watching interviewers. Like, have you ever listened to Chris Williamson, who does Modern Wisdom?
No, I don't think so.
So he's a really fascinating interviewer, and he was a guy who was on Love Island, and then he ended up doing club nights and had a very successful business doing that. And then he went into doing podcasting, and I would consider him like the young Jordan Peterson. And sometimes his questions are just, could you define that word for me? And then he stops back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that person goes on for 20 minutes and elaborates further on a topic, and he's not really asked a question. He's asked just to define points. I just think that's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, but then you will have guests that you really have to pull on that thread. You have to tease it out. You have to ask the question. You might have to ask the same question in a different way. You might even have to just ask the same question again. If you want, it's just that balance, isn't it? And I always say in the beginning, listen, look, I might have to ask you the same question over, a few times, not because you've done anything wrong, but like we just want a different version, or you might say, you might answer in a slightly different way or whatever. So sometimes the right question doesn't get the right answer the first time, and you can ask it again, or you can reword it or whatever. And also you have to be careful not, as you say, you've got your points to refer to. A lot of the times things will be getting answered, your questions will be getting answered regardless of whether you've asked it or not. So that's where the listening comes in, that actually you've got the and that's true of a good presenter, and it's also true of a good director. The really good directors, they know when they've got it, and even if you haven't asked half the questions that you worked out, they go, no, we've got it, we've got enough, we've got this, we've got what we need. That's great. Or they'll go, no, we asked, they answered that question in the top of that, or they or they no, fine, or we just need to maybe get a clearer sense of that. But apart from that, it's all good. So it's and that's where the listening is, and obviously in my job, I'm lucky that it's not only my ears there. I've got maybe 5, 6, 7 different pairs of ears, everyone listening, everybody, working collaboratively to do it. So, which is obviously not, something that you don't have the luxury of, but yeah, I mean, I think it looks like you're doing a great job. You're listening, you're referring to things that have been mentioned in your next question or whatever, and you're segueing nicely and stuff. So yeah, I mean, with 60, 70, that sounds like a lot. That sounds like a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just generally very, very ballsy, I think, about messaging a lot of people. Like, since I started this a year ago, I haven't missed a guest show on a Monday at any point, and I'm hoping and trying to keep that run going. I've had a few repeat, but I've never had an empty Monday where I didn't have anyone. So fingers crossed that continues. But I find it such a fascinating medium, and just listening back to episodes, I'm one of those ones that, you can call it narcissistic if you like, but I quite like listening back to my episodes. One, because I always hear something interesting and new from a guest that I didn't pick up that first time. But also it's and I'm sure you get this, especially if you ever do in live telling. There's things that are commonplace in normal conversation that are not commonplace when you're doing an interview. I remember listening to my first ever episode a few years ago, and I put it up, when I started the show, and things like, yeah, cool, yeah, that's normal in conversation. I didn't do that if I was meeting you in the street or in a pub. I'll be a bit rude. But in a podcast, that's such a weird, annoying, jarring thing to listen to. The interviewer, I just go, So is there things like that you found that you're communicating, but your communicating style has had to change when you are in TV, and particularly live TV?
Yeah. I mean, it's the difference between being in vision and not. So I know you're listening to me regardless of whether you're saying anything or not, because you're looking at me, you're nodding, you're obviously engaged, and you're there, you're present. I would imagine those things probably become more important if we couldn't see each other, but I think it's just that, I am here, I'm listening, I'm there. So yeah, in telly, I think the main difference between having a conversation for the purposes of media and a normal conversation in the street is you try and condense your questions. We have podcast is a beautiful medium that it's the longest form.
Which is rare these days with TikTok and things like that, right? 100%. It's a unique medium.
It's bucking the trend. If you think now people want 10, 15 seconds max, to sit and talk to someone about something for 30 to half an hour to an hour is pretty unheard of. So you don't need to worry too much about condensing everything, but in telly, we're always trying to just taking out any unnecessary words, bring that, and sometimes I have to do that. Sometimes I will ask the question in a fairly sort of laconic way, sort of as I'm finding my thought, and then I establish what it is I'm trying to get at, and then you ask the question again in a very more punchy, tight, succinct way, which is more broadcast friendly. So, you adapt the way you speak in that sense. And with answers, you try and keep them as sort of, efficient as possible without being is trying to find that balance, answering the question fully but keeping it tight enough that they can use it, because, we are condensing hundreds of hours into an hour, so it's every second counts, so you're more efficient. But apart from that, I don't think there's too many differences in having a conversation over a pint in a pub and in front of someone just with a camera and a sound recordist, really.
So transitioning onto the health stuff a little bit, obviously, we met on the Food Truth or Scare show, and you've done another show about red meat as well. So I'll get interested to get your thoughts on that. But going through many series of Food Truth or Scare, has it changed your opinion on certain things about what is considered healthy? Has your opinion on health changed doing this show?
Yeah. Yes and no. I think we know, I think deep down, don't you, the basics. And it's an interesting one, because health and nutrition are arguably two of the most complicated subjects out there. They're up there with neurosurgery or space exploration, incredibly complex issues with lots of variables, and then applying that to a population is just, that it's almost infinite. The variations and the differences are almost infinite. The way you might interact with something, I might interact, and I think because you do that, you're more likely to do that. Yeah, but you haven't factored in this. You can't legislate for behavior. You can't. And I love it when you like, those eating yogurt were more likely to lose weight than the. It's like, yeah, but what other factors are involved in that? Like, the person choosing yogurt for breakfast is already more obviously on that path. Maybe it's got nothing to do with the yogurt. Maybe it's got the person that chooses yogurt for breakfast is going to be much less likely to choose fish and chips for lunch or have a few pints or whatever. The behavioral element of it is fascinating, and you can't ever take that out. Like, you can't, even in studies, you can't. Like, even if you're trying to, you can't. Let alone just going, yeah, no, I think this. But what I will say is, no matter how complicated the subject, the things that you need to apply are pretty simple. The rules you should follow and the things you should try and do are fairly simple, and we pretty much know them as well. They're not many of them would come as a massive surprise. It's like, it's like the computer, like the computer engineer, isn't it? He's gone to university for 4 years, knows everything about computers. His advice is turn it on and off, and it's the same for us with nutrition. It's like, and I'm not a qualified dietitian or nutritionist, but there are some very simple, easily applicable rules that you, if you follow, you will be healthier. It's as simple as that. We want to be sleeping as well as we can. We want to be exercising within whatever parameters of exercise you are okay with, whether that's a walk, whether that is a cycle, whether that's a swim, whether that's a HIIT session, whether that's a CrossFit session, whether that's mountain climbing or just taking the stairs. It's whatever movement is right for you. Drink plenty of water. Try and cut down on the stuff that's not great for you, but also that you have to take into consideration happiness as well, and that is a big part. If you love a pint of beer and that makes you happy, actually maybe not having a pint of beer on a Friday is probably worse for your health than not having it. And it's all about moderation. A little of what you like is okay, and being good enough most of the time is good enough as well. If you want to have a donut or a pizza or whatever, like, do it, but just try and be good most of the time. You know, try and have a balanced diet. Try and eat as much fruit and veg as you physically can, not just because it will help me pay my mortgage, but you know, it is good for you. Although I am slightly biased, but yeah, I mean, it's fairly straightforward stuff.
I think that's so true. Like with all the complexity there is around nutrition, the things I see in you know, my coaching practice and is twofold. There's one, people confusing health with trying to look like a men's or women's health cover model. And it's like they want this, but they want to live just like a moderation, healthy lifestyle. And they go into the intuitive eating thing of, well, you were intuitively eating before you started this. And as simple as it is, and it's interesting you mentioned behavior being the interesting factor here. Like, best example of this is any studies talking about the plant-based diets being healthier than omnivorous diets. And when you look at this, that people that go plant-based tend to be more health conscious generally than the people who eat meat that probably just go in at Big Macs and burgers. Now, if you equated the people who are on similar calories, similar nutrient density, would those results be different? Maybe, probably. It's hard to say, but you know you're going to be, you know, deficient in various things. But when I look at the things that slip people up when it comes to nutrition, it's very much behavior things. It's oversights in the amount of calories they're having. It's mistakes. It's guilt around food. It's not willing to own up to the things they don't want to admit. And it becomes so much more of a psychology game than it necessarily becomes a nutrient game, because so many people know roughly what they should eat, but it's doing it that becomes the challenging thing.
Yeah, and sticking to it. And that's why, you know, for me, it needs to be small and sustainable changes. And sometimes we you know, on Eat Well for Less, we'll go and work with a family and say their favorite dinner is sausage and chips from a fish and chip shop, from a chippy. Yeah. So it's deep fried sausage, deep fried chips, big portions. We say, right, that's your favorite meal. How and this is what I did with Fakeaway, actually, but we'll go on to that later maybe. But how do we take the fat, salt, sugar, calories out of that? Or how much can we take out but still retain that enjoyment? And you could do it quite a lot. You can come quite a way away from it, actually, you know, certainly when you're looking at deep fried versus like baked or whatever, you know. And once you put your condiments or your salt and vinegar on there or whatever, actually, maybe they could enjoy that meal as much. But then we get vilified, you know, by certain parties, and they go, you know, you've just given them a you know, the same, you know, replaced a bad meal with a bad meal. It's like, yeah, but if we said, look, you love deep fried sausage and chips, I'm going to give you kale, pine nuts, and you know, quinoa. They might do it they might not do it at all. They might do it for a day. They might do it for a week. They might do it for a month. But that will not be giving them the satisfaction and enjoyment that they used to have. And that is not going to be sustainable. That's not going to last. So we are better off. We are much better off going, I can pull 70% of the sat fat out of that meal, and I think you'll still enjoy it. And if that's the case, that's a win. Yes, of course, that still is, you know, you still wouldn't hold that up as this is the healthiest option, but it's significantly healthier. And then where else can we do the same? And what else can we do to pull out those, you know, the unnecessary, the needless sat, fat, salt, sugar, calories, whatever, but still give you a meal or a diet that you enjoy, that you can stick with. And that's the key. Small, sustainable changes. And if you don't see yourself, and this is why diets, you know, don't really work, because if you don't see yourself doing it in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years time, don't start. Like, there is no point. Like, there is no point in cutting something out of your diet that you can't cut out forever. You have to learn to moderate. You have to look for alternatives. You have to look for substitutions. You have to look at reducing the volume or whatever. But it has to be sustainable. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It will work in the short term. And then you get into this yo-yo thing. And then, you know, and then that has a psychological impact. You know, people get demoralized, and then they eat more, and then and then you see all these telltale signs start to come out. So small sustainable changes is always the way. It's interesting, the plant-based vegan diet. You know, I know vegans with terrible diets. And the emergence in plant-based junk food is extraordinary. People, there is a whole industry now out there creating products, some of which are healthy, some of which are not. And we've got a bit of a blind spot. The plant-based must be healthier. That's not, a plant is healthier, but a plant-based substitute, junk food's junk food, regardless of whether it's plant-based or not. That's that. That's an interesting space. And also I think there's lots of confusion out there I sort of feel more at peace with a Krispy Kreme donut and a full fat Coke and a McDonald's than some other products out there, because you can't go and have a Big Mac and not realize you're consuming a lot of calories and fat. You can't eat a Krispy Kreme donut and not realize you're consuming a lot of calories and sugar. You can't have a full, a Christmas red Coke and not realize there's a lot of sugar in it. But some of these other products that are, healthy, or, they look great, or they're natural, or they're this or they're that, and they've got added this and added that, people are buying these products thinking they're healthier, they're better for them. And in some ways there might be, but they also come with a lot of other things. And people genuinely don't know. And that's the worry for me, because I go, I've just had a cereal bar. I'm probably still due a treat. No, that was your treat. Just because it wasn't a Krispy Kreme donut. But you go, if you compare them like for like and go, there's as much sugar in that as there is in that. But if you ate that, you're not telling me you still just, you know what you're doing. You're going to it with your eyes wide open. So, I think and what we've always got to understand is there is a billion pound business driving this, wanting us to think certain things and buy certain things and act in a certain way. And that's fine. But we've just got to understand, we've got to be aware. And I think you've got to apply a bit of cynicism. There's got to be that inner cynic in you that just goes, right, it's telling me it's got 13 grams of protein. What's it not telling me?
Yeah.
Like, it's telling me, it's great. It's great. Like, in the same way that, a Krispy Kreme could probably say great source of energy. Yeah, good. Couldn't it? Like, that's a perfectly plausible claim, isn't it? The glucose, sugar, energy. But what's it not telling me? And so you've got to let's always have that slightly. Don't go around the shop worried about everything, and not everyone's out to get you and all of that. But go into everything with your eyes wide open, and just they're telling you something. What are they not telling you? Because they tell you what they want you to know.
It's amazing. It's amazing now working primarily in the online space in terms of coaching and working with people from more countries, how the different level of understanding in certain places, Australia, UK, USA, tend to be slightly more educated in terms of nutrition. Yet certain places in Europe, I work with a lot of guys from Serbia, and there's so much confusion around nutrition in these places of this food's good, this food's bad mentality, which creates, we talked about these yo-yoing and these unsustainable approaches. And I'm quite a big fan of some level of tracking your nutrition intake, whether that is full on tracking all your macros, MyFitnessPal, or whether that's hand-sized portion control, or some level of understanding how much calories are in your food. Because what I want to take away from a lot of these guys is that thing of Snickers bars bad, this is good. I'm like, well, if you look at your Snickers bar, understanding that, like, before you think about all these fancy things and hormones and all this complication, if you want to lose a little bit of your weight, if you want to improve the majority of your health markers, being in a calorie deficit will help you in the short term. So when you look at this Snickers bar, it's 350 odd calories, and you can go, right, if I'm going to have that, and this is my day, I'm going to have to be this much hungrier to fit that into my day. And then you decide, I don't want to be that much hungrier. I'm not going to have it. And you came to that choice. Or you go, yeah, it's worth it. I love a Snickers bar, or I love a pint of beer, or I love a Krispy Kreme. And it takes away this good and bad. It's just sort of like, it's like saying buying a holiday or buying a Rolex is bad because I'm saving money. None of these things are bad items. If you're budgeting, you just need to weigh out the pros and cons in that same approach. One thing you mentioned in the book, which I thought was really interesting, is talking about when you talk about adding a recipe book, is the importance of a meal plan and creating that sort of structure in people's days. And this is something like, if you've ever seen any of my stuff, I'm generally not a big fan of recipes. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm not a big fan of recipes is because I think it's the New Year's resolutions approach to dieting. It's like, right, I'm going to start a diet tomorrow. I'm going to have a low carb, high protein carbonara on Monday. And then I'm going to have a cauliflower pizza on Tuesday. And then I'm going to have this on Wednesday. I'm like, you're going to keep that up for 3 days. And it's going to be so much. And it's going to be so overwhelming. So what's your thoughts on getting people to enjoy cooking whilst keeping it simple enough for them to want to do it long term?
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think if you were to go into a really prescriptive meal plan and also tie that and connect that in with a diet, it feels like that might become, there's a lot to do all at once. But for me, a meal plan is crucial in terms of doing a few things. It saves you money. It saves you time, and it reduces your food waste, which also then feeds back into saving you money again. So we do it like every household, and it's probably happening. What time is it now? 2:00. In an hour or two, millions of households up and down the country will be having the conversation. What's for dinner? I don't know. What do you fancy? I don't know. What have we got? I don't know. I don't think we've got anything in. Right. Blah, 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 blah. Then people go for the takeaway, or they're having to root around, or maybe they might have to go to the shops to get some, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I advocate, and we advocate on Eat Well for Less, you sit down with everybody that's going to be eating those meals in your house, ideally, work out. And most people work on a fairly small rota of meals anyway. Like if you really boil it down, most households would have a repertoire of 10, 15 meals. So, you're not, it's not an infinite thing, Oh, we like a chili, we like a spag bowl, we like a shepherd's pie, we like a roast dinner, we like fajitas, we like, whatever it might be, boom, 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 boom. We might like Thai or this, that, and the other. Right, okay, cool. So you've got a relatively manageable repertoire anyway. So out of those meals that the whole family like and enjoy, let's just work it out. Okay, so Monday we're going to have this, Tuesday we're going to have that, Wednesday this, Wednesday that. And I get that some people find that a bit, I don't know what I'm going to want to eat next Wednesday. Okay, that's fine. I get that. But actually, if I averaged it out over your lifetime, I bet the same meal's coming up anyway. Like if I just said, like if we filmed you over the course of a 2, 3, 4, 5 year period, I bet you're eating the same meals, maybe not exactly on the same day, although I think invariably that would happen by default, but you would be eating the same cycle of meals anyway, regardless. So what you're doing now is just putting a day to it so you can go and do your shopping. So create your meal plan, leave a free day if you want. Friday, we're going to go off piste. We're going to freestyle it, whatever. Like we're going to live, we're going to be dangerous. We're going to take, we're not going to plan for a Friday, but plan for the majority of days, and then write a list of the ingredients you need to make those meals. And then that's your shopping list. And then cross-reference your shopping list with what you've already got in your cupboards. Cross off, I've got tin tomatoes, I've already got pasta, I've got this, I've got that, fine. Now you've got a net shopping list. That's what you need to buy. And if you go and buy those things, only those things, you will shop very more effectively, efficiently, and quicker. And people say, I haven't got time to plan. The time you waste not planning, writing a meal plan will take you about 5 minutes. You will win that 5 minutes back and more over the course of the week. You'll win it in the shopping trip alone because you're not wandering around going, well, what do you fancy? What should we get? What have we got? You'll win it there, and then you'll win it every day by not having that age-old conversation and discussion of what's for dinner, what do you want? And basically what we're doing by not having a meal plan and not having those ingredients in to make those meals is you're basically subscribing by choice to a cooking competition every evening. That's the Rustle Up Challenge or the Invention Challenge or MasterChef. That's ultimately what they do. There's a load of stuff, go and make something. This is really hard, but we're doing that in our homes and by choice regularly. So do yourself a favor, get a meal plan and stick to it as much as you can. But listen, do your best. That's I don't ever want, I'm always mindful that with advice, comes connotation and consequence. And I always think, listen, if you just do your best, that's all you can do. And that's all I ever say. If you can't meal plan for 7 days or 5 days, try a couple.
Yeah.
Try a couple. Do your best. Just, do what you can.
I think there's two things that are really, really important that you mentioned. I think it's interesting to look at that the same meals coming up on repeat. And I think there's a couple of connotations here. So it's one of the things where people go into mentality of dieting and making it harder for themselves than they need to be, is if you took their diet they were having prior to starting the diet and you looked at how many meals they had, it's probably a very in one handful worth of meals. And in a lot of diets doing, so placing it the same, probably more variety, just different meals. But the mentality now is I can't have that. And it's almost like I can't have the things I want, which will transition nicely into the book. But I also think as well, when we're looking at a lot of people do with dieting, they will sit there and go, right, I need to make this enjoyable. They're so worried about it that they're all of a sudden try and do 30, 40 recipes, and they'll have 30, 40 different meals the next 7 days. Whereas if you pick, let's say, as you said, 3 to 5 you really like, and do them on repeat until you're comfy, and then add one. It just makes this far less an overwhelming procedure. But I think the other thing you mentioned there was good, is just about taking away that sort of like decision fatigue with sort of stuff. Like we all have this tendency about saving time. How much time do we waste doing things? I get this with tracking food intake, where people go, it takes so long to track my food intake. I'm like, if you open your app every meal, you wait for it to load, you put the food in, you worry about what you have, you work out where you're going, you go into the supermarket, it's a massive task. Whereas if you spent 5 minutes at the end of the day just planning your next day's meals, or on a Sunday, plan your week ahead's meals, you don't have to think about that again. That's mental headspace you've freed up for other things in your life.
And it's the same as anything. The more you do it, the quicker it gets, doesn't it? That's the same with cooking. That's the same with meal planning. That's the same as all of these things. And that, if you were tracking something, once you start to do it, it will just get quicker and quicker and easier and easier and easier. There are different there are different thoughts in and around that, area, whether some people, whether it does help, whether it doesn't. There's studies to prove and disprove everything, isn't there? But yeah, the more you do something, the easier and the quicker it gets, for sure. Absolutely. And you're right, just freeing up. It's like, I always use the analogy, go to the gym. Like if I go to the gym for an hour, I could get the same results in half an hour, 100%. Like 100%. Like I don't need to be there an hour. I could work harder, smarter, more efficiently, more effectively, without a doubt, and that's true of everything. That's true of the kitchen, that's true of the shop, that's true of the gym, that's true of everything. It's just trying to, just do it. The more you do it, the easier it gets.
So going into the book, I mean, I know a few people that have embarked on writing books, and they say it's the hardest thing they've ever done. This is your second book now, and so like, I can't imagine how tricky it is to write a recipe book and come up with however many original recipes. Like, what was the thought process go on to this book? Why have you chosen the fake away method? And how did you actually piece this together?
So it is quite a task to write a book. The first book first of all, it was my first one. And second of all, it was just a more of an everyday sort of good food sorted every day. So then I really struggled, because it was, what do I put in there? Like, okay, you need this amount of meat, this amount of fish, this many veggies, you need some breakfast, you need some lunches, so that was my sort of framework, which is fairly, endless. So that I sort of struggled with that, but really loved it, really enjoyed it. But with Fakeaway, it was really easy, because the premise behind Fakeaways, we are a nation of takeaway lovers. Takeaways are expensive. They're not all unhealthy, but let's face it, lots of them are. They can be high in fat, salt, sugar, calories, but we love them. And I thought, how much of those calories, fat, salt, sugar can I take out with that meal, with that recipe, still delivering the flavor and the enjoyment that you want? And actually, the answer is quite a lot. It is quite a lot. But then that gave me a fabulous framework. So I've gone through takeaway outlets. So, you've got your curry takeaway, you've got your Japanese, takeaway restaurant, you've got your fish and chip shop, you've got your burger bar diner style, you've got your Chinese. And so then I just went, right, what are the most popular Japanese takeaways? What are the most popular Indian takeaways? What are the most popular Chinese takeaways? What are the most popular things from a fish and chip shop? And and it was basically reverse engineering. So you right, what's in that? Right, okay, how much of that can I take it? Does it need the ghee? Does it need the butter? Does it need, okay, that requires it to be deep fried. Can I get the same result baking? Can I get the same result shallow frying? Can I get the same result without using batter but using breadcrumb? And it was actually the easiest. It was almost scientific. It wasn't creative. It was the opposite of creative in a way. Actually, I was deconstructing. So that was fascinating, and it was really, really, really great. And it was just, some things I couldn't do. Some things, the healthier version didn't quite cut it. And so you're like, okay, so I just won't do that. But loads of the recipes, actually, you can take out so much and still enjoy it. And also, interestingly as well, and I'll tell you another just very quick anecdote, is how much your taste buds change. So I did a program called Tomorrow's Food, and they wanted me to take meal replacement tablets, meal supplements. And this is like, how are we going to feed a growing population with less resources and all of that? So one of the ideas, one of the scientific discoveries was a tablet. Basically, it gives you all your nutrition, calories, So I was supposed to take these for a month, and you shouldn't gain weight, you shouldn't lose weight. It should keep you where you are.
Yeah.
And I was getting, at that time, I was working a lot, busy, early mornings, and I was drinking strong but milky coffees with 2 sugars, and probably having 5 a day, maybe even more, 4, 5, 6 a day, 2 sugars, milk. And they said, look, we don't want you to have that, because that's obviously sugar and the milk, and that will affect the result. But we don't want you to have caffeine withdrawal, so you can have black coffee. The first time I drank a black coffee, it was like medicine. It was disgusting. It was disgusting. And I thought, there's no way I could drink that. But within 2 or 3 days, that was the coffee that I now drank and enjoyed. And if you gave me, and we're talking in a small time frame, and if you gave me my old coffee back, that would be as undrinkable as that black coffee was in the beginning. Yeah. So even if something, even if you want your deep fried fish and chips or your saveloy or your thing, if you have a slightly healthier version a couple of times, that will be the new standard. That's the new benchmark. And if you had the old one, like, I like a cooked breakfast, love a cooked breakfast, very rarely, very, very rarely now. But if when I can, I enjoy it, but I can't have it all fried now. It's all like, cooked in the oven or on the grill or whatever, and I couldn't have a proper fried breakfast now. Like, that would be like so greasy and oily and unpleasant, but it's about just changing the dial little by little, and your taste buds will adapt, your taste buds will change, and then you won't want to go back. Even if you think that I could never not love this, you'd be surprised.
Yeah. And that's when you're looking at finding the middle ground and the balancing act, it's the same thing when you're looking at someone trying to get healthier and lose weight. You said earlier about how having such a massive removal, certainly if you don't have a deadline from what they were doing before, might be too hard to follow. But at the same time, we often see people are going into too far down the sustainable route of like, well, I'll just have some cookies because I want it to be sustainable, and they just stop sneaking in 3, 4, 5, 6 a week. And I always have this conversation with clients, like, what you think is sustainable now will not be what you want to be sustainable 10, 12, 20 weeks down the line. I go, right, like, let's look at building some habits now. Let's get you better relationship with food. Let's get you aware of how many calories are in your food. Let's get you cooking some food again. And then you get to the end of whatever time frame they have for coaching and go, right, what do you want back? I'd love a beer. But you might go, oh, I used to have a dessert every day. I don't fancy that anymore. And like, okay, cool. Yeah. That's now not something you actually want anymore. And sustain your taste buds, as you say, have sort of changed. So going into just finishing off a little bit, talking about the book. One of the things I think was really, really important you mentioned here was the importance of teaching kids to cook. So like, for people out there, and I don't have children, people out there who maybe rely on takeaways too much, and we spoke about earlier about time management and all the kids will take away a lot of that time. We spoke about that at the start. What advice would you give for families wanting to start to make cooking a family action? And what skills do you feel like everyone should learn to be a better cook for themselves, to be healthier, or for their kids to learn in life?
Yeah, okay, it's a great question. I think there's loads that you could do. I think the main thing is make it fun. Make it fun, and especially with takeaway, say for example, or trying to replace that takeaway with a home cooked. Look, let's face it, like you're not gonna, if they're used to getting a happy meal or whatever from a certain place, you're going to struggle to replicate that exactly. But what you can do is you can make a very good, healthier version of burger and chips, but make it fun. Like wrap up a little toy. It doesn't need to be a new toy. It could be something you've already got. Maybe find a way of like what I do is with my kids is I make them like a cocktail thing. Like it's not a cocktail. It's basically just like a glass of squash, but you put an umbrella in there and a straw and a thing, and suddenly like this is magic. This is an event where like it's like we're at a restaurant. We're not. We're just at home. And I've just and you might put out like a fun serviette, or you can get different containers for things. You can get little boxes or chip wrappers and make it fun. Give it that sense of event. Get them involved in the kitchen as much as possible. In terms of what sort of skills, I mean, obviously chopping is important, but it's the thing that people are nervous about doing within and with reason. You have to be careful, kids and knives, for sure. But weighing out, getting the measuring in, there's so many things they can do. But just get them involved. It is messier. Like there is no dressing that up. Getting the kids in the kitchen is messier. But it's the greatest lesson you can give them. If you think about some of the things we teach them, we teach them algebra, we teach them all sorts of different things. How often are they going to use that? How applicable is that in the real world? But you teach them to cook and give them a good understanding of, basic understanding of nutrition. They'll be able to feed themselves and their family every single day for the rest of their lives, and then pass that on as well. So it's arguably the most valuable thing we could ever give our children. Make it fun. I love communal eating. That's my favorite thing. I think that's really important for lots of reasons, and that's, I think that whole plating someone's food up, like first of all, portion thing, the psychology of that with kids is interesting. It becomes it could be insurmountable for them. It could be overwhelming. So what I do is we have bowls and dishes and plates in the middle, and it's help yourself. And that can apply to lots of loads and loads and loads of recipes. And that does a couple of things, actually. What kids will eat and what they won't eat partly is down to control. They don't have a lot of control in their life, children. So what they eat is one area where they can exert some control. So you're giving that control back. You're saying, look, I don't want you to eat everything, but just try some stuff. That it's engaging, it's informal, it's interactive. I think it makes so much sense. Plus, anything that isn't eaten is untouched, therefore can be made into something else the next day or utilized as leftovers. You're not, it's not covered in ketchup or half eaten or on someone's plate. So communal eating is a great way for me of doing it. And just make it fun and get them involved in the meal planning as well, because that gives you the, if they come home from school, go, oh God, I don't want cottage pie tonight. It's like, well, you were there when we agreed it, so what do you want? Like, you've had an input in this. So get them involved in the planning, get them involved in the cooking as much as possible, and just try and make it fun, try and make it informal, try and make it interactive.
I think there's so many important lessons with that, right? From like kids being able to weigh out portion sizes and understand, tune into their own hunger signals, which will help them be healthier down the line as well. To, as you said, I thought it was very interesting talking about getting, having kids control their food, when a lot of kids are very picky eaters. And I don't know if your kids are, but I can imagine less so.
They have their moments, of course, like all kids are kids, you know what I mean? Like, and we're not no one's perfect, but by giving them that, you'll be surprised. I promise you, if you've got fussy eaters in your house, I promise you, by giving them that control back, they will put things on their plate you will be surprised by. I promise you.
Yeah, and I can imagine as well with the communal eating idea as well, in a world where everyone's going to be attached to their phones, having something where it's a bit of family time. They start planning it together. It as you said, it becomes fun, and it just allows people to be. I always find it's a weird thing with podcasts. Podcasts always come full circle, and I'm going to bring the word present back that you mentioned right at the start of this, which is It's a great thing. So I think that's a huge lesson. So just two closing questions to finish off, or I'll let you get on with your day. I know how busy you must be. You've researched all these different cuisines to put together this great and amazing amount of recipes that are in the Fake Away book. What is your favorite cuisine of food?
Middle Eastern, I think.
Ooh, why so? I wouldn't have thought you would have said that.
So it works into that sharing, that feasting, that meze, the a bit of everything. I love my food. I'm quite greedy, so I don't want to eat one thing. I want to have a mixture of everything. I love Middle Eastern food. The breads, the hummus, the salads, the grilled meats. Just really simple, flavorful food. With that sense of communal eating and sharing and stuff, like the meze. Yeah, that's probably up there with my favorite. One of my favorite things is a kebab. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
They're demonized, but the shish kebab is like the healthiest thing. You're talking about grilled meat with raw veg. Like, it's delicious and like properly healthy. Like, yeah. but someone would go, like, if you walked out of a kebab shop, someone would go, "Whoa, what are you playing out there?" They've got their sandwich, their pre-made sandwich, thinking that theirs is a better choice. Actually, grilled meat, if you eat meat, and raw cabbage and veg, bit of chili sauce. That's I love that. But I think we eat a lot of Japanese and Thai now as a family. The katsu curry is probably like a mainstay in our house. The tikka masala is a real popular. So with big flavors, just food with big flavors. But I think one cuisine, and obviously Italian, Mediterranean is a mega, isn't it? But yeah, I would say my personal favorite is Middle Eastern, like a big tabbouleh, like loads of fresh herbs and delicious.
So last question before we finish on finding out where you are. If someone, going back to the start of this episode, if someone was looking to, in a way, follow in your footsteps, get themselves involved in TV, like, how would you advise someone to get started?
Wow, yeah, I wouldn't even know, to be honest. I mean, I think probably the best thing will find out why you want to do it. What is it you're trying to get from it, first of all? And then go into it with your eyes wide open, because not everything is as seems. And I think what we've got to be careful of is you don't chase the end result. You sort of need to be aware of where you want to go, but that can't be the only thing, because first of all, that might change, that might not happen, that might not be right for you even. So you've got to, and I know this sounds a bit of a cop-out, but you've got to enjoy the journey. Like, otherwise you can't just think, oh, if I was to get a chain of gyms, I'd be happy. Okay, great. Maybe you would. Maybe that is what you want. Maybe that is what you will get. But you've got to enjoy working in one. You've got to enjoy all the elements of it, because you don't go from A to Z. There is B, C, D, E, F, G, and you've got to enjoy every element of that, or certainly enjoy parts of it. So I wouldn't fixate too much. But there's great, social media is a great platform. There's challenges with it, of course. But in terms of answering your question, if you wanted to get a profile or to have a platform, YouTube, social media, podcasts, all of these things, you could start to do those other mediums. But I would imagine it would be slightly more dependent on what you want, what element do you want, and then look around and see who does it, like who's your peers, who's doing a good job in that area, what you like about them. Maybe even reach out to advice, because obviously news readers would follow a slightly different path to someone that wanted to be in entertainment or fact or whatever. So just maybe reach out to a few people. You could speak to production companies, maybe speak to agents, talent agents. There's loads of different ways, but it's a very broad area, and you would probably want to hone into an area that's more specific to what you want. But I think, just as a general rule of thumb, don't always focus only on the end. You've got to enjoy the stages to get there. And the more you enjoy anything, and this is what I say to the kids, it doesn't matter what you do. If you enjoy it and you do your best, you will be successful. You will be okay.
I think that's a good bit of advice for anyone in any endeavor. So where can people find you, and also where can people buy the book?
So I think the book is available in most bookstores. It's also available online. So just Google Chris Bavin Fakeaway. Follow me on social media. I'm not very good at it, and I'm not like prominent, but I'm on Instagram, and I think it's just Chris.Bavin, and on Twitter, I think it's Chris_Bavin. Yeah, I got lots of people. I always try and reply to all messages. And if anyone's got any questions or anything, feel free to ask.
Well, thank you very much, man. It's been a really, really good conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, you're brilliant. Yeah, I think you're really good. You got a great way about it. I've done a lot of podcasts on this side. And yeah, you do a really good job. So yeah, well done.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.